Chapter 2480, Space Battle Form. Chapter 2480. Space Battle Form. There were countless Buddhas gathering at Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven. Among them were many ancient Buddhas who had years of experience. They were present when Donghuang the Great visited Spirit Mountain a few centuries ago. Even up until now, the scene remained fresh in their memories. Futian was somewhat different from Donghuang the Great. The Buddhas who had experienced what happened in the past were well aware of this. In the past, even before Donghuang the Great set foot in the world of Buddhism, he actually had read countless Buddhist scriptures and had cultivated the Buddhist path. Exactly because of his involvement in Buddhism, Donghuang the Great came to Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven with the intention of seeking the Buddhist path from the Lord of all Buddhas. When Donghuang the Great came to seek pointers from Spirit Mountain, his performance was even more stunning than Futian's. Not only did he fight and defeat the Buddhas using Buddhist superpowers, but he also debated with them. His comprehension of Buddhist doctrine was on par with that of many senior Buddhas. Therefore, Donghuang the Great could be considered a true unprecedented genius. His abilities were unrivaled. Many senior Buddhas felt ashamed of their shortcomings when faced with him. Not only was Donghuang the Great well-versed in all kinds of Buddhist doctrine, but he also had a profound understanding of them. This caused many Buddhas who were on Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven back then felt disgraced. Because of that, the Buddhas on Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven were divided into two factions based on their opinion of Donghuang the Great. Some of them were resentful of him because he had embarrassed them, while some of them respected and admired him. The Buddhas could still remember when the Lord of all Buddhas revealed himself and met Donghuang the Great. The first question Donghuang the Great had for him was, what was his view of the world now that he had proven his way as Bodhi? It was apparent from this that Donghuang the Great already had great ambition back then. In terms of cultivation, Futian now could not compare with Donghuang the Great centuries ago. They weren't even on the same level. However, the various Buddhas felt they were seeing another Donghuang the Great, because there was something different about Futian. Just like Donghuang the Great, Futian had just come in contact with the Buddhist path and joined a Buddhist sect for mere months. In such a short span of time, he had comprehended Buddhist doctrine and used Buddhist superpowers to defeat various Buddhas, dominating the battles as he advanced to the top level of Spirit Mountain. The various Buddhas saw the image of Donghuang the Great in him. Of course, there was also another area where Futian and Donghuang the Great were similar. When Donghuang the Great previously came to Spirit Mountain, no one could get a read on him, even when using Buddhist superpowers. Now it was also the same for Futian. Clairvoyants could not pry into everything in his mind. They couldn't see through to his past or future. This made the various Buddhas feel as though these two individuals were men of destiny. They were born extraordinary and were destined for exceptional achievements. That was why clairvoyance bore no results. The various Buddha lords all wanted to get a read on Futian. However, the result was always the same, just like with Donghuang the Great back then. Futian did not know what the various Buddhas were thinking. He continued advancing upwards. Shengyan Buddha Lord was staring at Futian. Futian had actually made his way up here. Centuries ago, Donghuang the Great had already done this once before. Now, if they allowed Futian to repeat the feat, the various Buddhas of Western Heaven would be disgraced. Right then, Shengyan Arhat stood up. The light of Buddha circled around him, and immediately the gazes of the various Buddhas turned towards him. Was he finally making his move? Right now, unless Shengyan Arhat stepped forward, it was possible that no one could suppress Futian. Tongchan Arhat was also present. He was at the same level as the Shengyan Arhat. He looked down below. His enchanting gaze seemed to reveal a faint smile. When Futian first arrived in Western Heaven, the various Buddhist cultivators all knew of his arrival. Tongchan Arhat had personally gone to meet Futian. He never thought that Futian was far more talented than they had imagined. Not only had Futian stirred up a storm in Six Desires Heaven, but he had now single-handedly fought his way up Spirit Mountain. He wanted to imitate Donghuang the Great's feat and defeat the various Buddhas. Now the Arhats had no choice but to meet Futian head-on. Shengyan Arhat floated above Futian. His pupils were terrifying as they emitted golden light of Buddha. Yi Futian's manner was equally imposing, and not at all inferior to his. With the aid of Mahavairakana, Yi Futian managed to defeat all the Buddhist cultivators along the way, and had arrived at this stage. Please give me some pointers, Yi Futian said politely. Xinyan Arhat placed his palms together and replied, likewise. Although both sides bore animosity for each other, their conversation sounded amiable. However, once they finished their verbal exchange, the palm of Mahavairakana immediately charged forward and crushed the space. Intense rumbling could be heard as it lunged towards Xinyan Arhat. Xinyan Arhat's body still floated in midair, and had not moved an inch. His light of Buddha shone brilliantly, and a gigantic illusory figure of Buddha appeared. It then transformed into an enormous ancient golden Buddha. At this very instant, it was as though all the powers in the heavens and earth were under the control of Xinyan Arhat. With his body at the center, a gigantic and boundless illusory figure of Buddha appeared on Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven. Even Yi Futian was enveloped within this illusory Buddha. In reality, the entire Spirit Mountain was encompassed within it. However, the cultivators could not see the illusory Buddha figure with their naked eyes, since they were within it. They could only detect it with their senses. If they leaped up into the high heavens and looked down below, then only could they see the gigantic illusory Buddha figure. The palm of Mahavairakana struck the golden shield around Xinyan Arhat's body. However, this time, unlike before, neither the golden shield shattered, nor was the cultivator hurt. This time, the golden body of Xinyan Arhat remained sturdy. No cracks appeared on it. It merely shook. On top of that, the space and the entire Spirit Mountain trembled violently. It was seemingly caused by the gigantic illusory Buddha. The gigantic Buddha was shaking. It was a battle form. When Yi Futian saw this scene, he knew his opponent had similarly coalesced a powerful battle form. He raised his head and looked at it. His will scanned the gigantic illusory Buddha that enveloped the space. From the looks of it, figures at the Arhat level were indeed extraordinary. The previous cultivators could not be compared to them. It is the space battle form, a Buddha commented. Xinyan Arhat cultivated the space battle form. When in battle, he is one with space. It is his to use, and under his absolute control. Although Yi Futian cultivated the Mahavairakana battle form, he may be suppressed, a Buddha added. Xinyan Arhat had cultivated Buddha's superpowers for many years. He had always been comprehending the space battle form, and had cultivated it to a high level. His cultivation plane was also higher than that of Yi Futian. It was possible that he could use this battle form to suppress Yi Futian's Mahavairakana battle form. Right at this moment, Yi Futian suddenly sensed an overbearing pressure acting on him, pinning him to his spot. He could hardly move. It was as though the entire space was pressing against him and locking him to his spot. This sensation was identical to that of the binding technique he experienced before. However, the pressure acting on Yi Futian now was even more powerful than that of the binding technique. The space seemed to be under Xinyan Arhat's absolute control. With a mere thought of his opponent, Yi Futian was trapped within the space. Rumble! From the Mahavairakana battle form, golden light of Buddha radiated outwards and lit up the space. Terrifying rumbling sounds could be heard. The Mahavairakana battle form was shaking, attempting to free itself from the binding technique by expanding. If he were bound to one spot, he would be at the mercy of his opponent. Humph! Chapter 2481. A Taste of One's Own Medicine. Chapter 2481. A taste of one's own medicine. The light of Buddha from Xinyan Arhat's figure filled the sky. He had a stern expression. He placed his palms together and faced Yi Futian. He closed his eyes, and a heavenly eye appeared on his third eye. In an instant, within the space that was enveloped by the gigantic Buddha, other Buddhas appeared. Tens of thousands of ancient Buddhas filled the sky. They all remained in the same pose, wielding golden divine swords forged from the light of Buddha. They were actually wielding the Wuxia swords used by the previous Buddhist cultivator, who had battled Yi Futian. The immobilization technique and Wuxia sword were previously used against Yi Futian by members of their sect. However, Yi Futian had used the Vajra spell, as well as the palm of Mahavairakana to negate these techniques. Now, Xinyan Arhat unleashed these two techniques again. His techniques were clearly more powerful than the previous cultivator. He was using the space battle form to power up the immobilization technique, and relying on the power of the various Buddhas to unleash the might of the Wuxia swords. Each Buddha had special Buddhist seals. Their sharp swords were pointed towards Futian. A faint murderous intent emanated from them. Xingyan Buddha Lord's line of Buddhist cultivators originally maintained the order in the world of Buddhism. They were naturally in charge of dealing judgment to perpetrators. There seemed to be more to their Wuxia swords than met the eye. The various Buddhas charged forward with their Wuxia swords enhanced with Buddhist doctrine. The space was immediately shattered, seeming as though it would be ripped apart. "He is unraveling the space," someone commented. Witnessing the might of the Wuxia swords, the expressions of the various Buddhas were stern. Once one cultivated Buddhist doctrine to the utmost limit, it was rumored that one could detach themselves from all things, even space and time. Xingyan Arhat cultivated the space battle form and had absolute control over this space. Right now, he directed the Wuxia sword, attempting to unravel the space. If this continued, Futian's body would also disintegrate. This technique was extremely overbearing. As Xingyan Arhat attacked and defended, he unleashed 4 Buddhist superpowers. His ability was indeed extremely powerful. The Wuxia sword unraveled the space and charged straight towards Futian's coalesced battle form. From the Mahavajrayana battle form, the light of Buddha radiated outwards. Although Futian was bound, the might of the battle form was still very powerful. The sound of Buddha circled the battle form. As Futian chanted the Vajra spell, countless runes flowed around him. It was as though it enhanced the Mahavajrayana battle form, making it indestructible. Swoosh! The Wuxia swords came crashing towards the Mahavajrayana battle form. The terrifying attack caused cracks to appear on it. It seemed as though it was about to shatter. When they saw this scene, the various Buddhas felt a sense of relief. It seemed that although Futian was strong, he still could not withstand the might of Xingyan Arhat, who had similarly cultivated a powerful battle form. After all, there was still a gap between their cultivation planes. Even if Futian was defeated, it was to be expected. After all, Buddhist doctrine was an ability that he had recently cultivated for several months. If Futian could use all his original abilities in this battle, he might be more powerful. In terms of Buddhist doctrine, even though Futian had extraordinary talent, it was still difficult for him to surpass Xingyan Arhat. This battle was about to end. Xingyan Arhat's attack was also extremely dangerous. If he was not careful and Futian could not withstand his attack, Futian might be heavily injured, or even have his body of way crippled. It was obvious that Xingyan Arhat bore animosity towards Futian. He would not hold back. If anything actually happened, he would not show mercy. More and more cracks appeared on Futian's battle form. The various Buddhas unleashed their Wuxia swords at the same time. It was difficult, even for the golden Mahavajrayana battle form, to withstand such an attack. It began to shatter and break apart. Xingyan Arhat's eyes were tightly shut, and his palms were together as he unleashed his powerful Buddhist superpowers. He did not look at Futian, but he could sense everything that was happening. The corners of his mouth curled slightly into a smile, which was cold and sinister. However, Futian stood there unshaken. His palms were still together as he chanted the sound of Buddha. The sound of Buddha circled around him. As the destructive Wuxia swords came charging down, the gigantic Mahavajrayana battle form shattered into countless pieces. Under the besiegement of the Wuxia swords, it was decimated. The destructive attack was about to strike Futian. The various Buddhas kept staring in his direction. Would Futian's figure be decimated as well? Under the watchful gazes of the various Buddhas, Futian's body was surrounded by the light of Buddha. It was as though another battle form appeared. Just as the Wuxia swords came crashing towards him, Futian's body seemed to become ethereal. When the attack landed, cracks appeared in the space. However, Futian was still there. He did not seem to be in the same space as the destructive power of the Wuxia swords, but rather in a parallel space. This bizarre scene caused the various Buddhas to reveal strange expressions. The Wuxia sword attack landed, but did not touch Futian's body. Instead, the swords immediately shattered. How did Futian pull this off? "It is the void battle form," someone exclaimed. A Buddha said, "Who would have thought that he managed to cultivate 3 battle forms? The Akalanatha battle form, the Mahavarakana battle form, and the void battle form." The void battle form was another name for the space battle form. In actuality, they were the same Buddhist technique. Shenyan Arhat used the power of the void battle form to deal with Yi Futian. Yi Futian used the same battle form to evade. Despite this, both of them unleashed different abilities of the battle form. This space battle form was a powerful application of the power of the Great Path of Space by the Buddhist sections. Yi Futian was proficient in the path of space, and had also cultivated the miniature world. Hence, he had managed to cultivate the void battle form. A Buddha lamented, "Compared to Donghuang the Great of the past, Yi Futian has spent less time cultivating Buddhist doctrine. However, he is also proficient in various Buddhist doctrines. These 3 battle forms are all difficult ones to cultivate, and he has actually mastered them. If he is given more time, he will most likely be as impressive as Donghuang the Great of the past, capable of mastering all kinds of Buddhist doctrines." Just as he was commenting, silhouettes of various Buddhas appeared on the battlefield. Each and every Buddha seemed to be formed with Yi Futian as the original. This was yet another application of the void battle form. Before this, Shenyan Arhat used the same technique to unleash the Wuxia sword simultaneously. All the divine swords charged out at the same time. Yi Futian appeared to be mimicking Shenyan Arhat's move and the superpower he cultivated. Besides that, Yi Futian was no longer restrained by the spatial power. The Buddhas opened their mouths at the same time. Suddenly, raging roars filled the sky. Dragons and elephants could be faintly seen up above. When all the Buddhas shouted at the same time, their voices reverberated in space. The vast space seemed to turn into a sea with churning waves. The dragons and the elephants stirred up gigantic waves and destroyed everything around, forming a terrifying illusion. Shenyan Arhat appeared exceptionally tiny amidst the illusion. The Buddhas had been angered. This was their wrathful roar. The Buddhas summoned by Shenyan Arhat exploded in the sea and crumbled into dust right away. Even the gigantic illusory figure of Buddha, which enveloped the entire space, shook violently. It was on the verge of collapsing. The battle form of Shenyan Arhat became unstable as his spiritual soul trembled. He had yet to regain his composure from his surprise at Yi Futian cultivating the void battle form, when an extremely overbearing Buddhist musical attack technique followed. Yi Futian's attack also did not seem to stop. The various Buddhas in the sky were still forming Buddhist divine seals. A majestic and vast power of Buddha pressed down on the space. Right now, Shenyan Arhat felt an intense sense of danger. Chapter 2482, Suppression. Chapter 2482, Suppression Rumble. Faced with the wrathful Buddhist roar, the Buddhas summoned by Shenyan Arhat shattered and were chipped away. The gigantic battle form shook as though it would crack into pieces at any given moment. The spiritual soul of Shenyan Arhat trembled as well. Aside from the raging roar, scorching suns appeared in the sky. The suns were hot and of utmost yang, capable of melting everything in the world. At the same time, their power was extremely overbearing. "They are all Mahavarokanas," someone exclaimed. All the Buddhist cultivators witnessed how the Buddhas summoned by Yi Futian transformed into Mahavarokanas. They unleashed the palms of Mahavarakana at the same time, intending to crush everything in this part of the space. It was the dual battle form. The Buddhist cultivators felt their hearts tremble as they stared in the direction where Yi Futian was. It was hard for them to stay calm. This dual battle form did not refer to Yi Futian cultivating 2 battle forms, but instead him combining 2 battle forms and unleashing them at the same time. Yi Futian initially unleashed the void battle form. Right now, he used the void battle form to summon various Buddhas, and they became Mahavarokanas. The 2 battle forms layered over each other as they attacked together. Their might was astonishing. In the sky above, the Mahavarokanas were no longer bound by space. Palms of Mahavarakana came pressing down at the same time, crashing down towards Shenyan Arhat below. They were overbearing. Shenyan Arhat placed his palms together, and the light of Buddha shone from his figure. The gigantic ancient Buddha that enveloped Spirit Mountain immediately shone with golden light. It seemed to be forming a physical presence. The space within this ancient Buddha seemed to be solidifying. The palms of Mahavarakana slowed down as they faced resistance. At the same time, many arms extended from the ancient Buddha behind Shunyan Arhat. All the arms unleashed void palms simultaneously to clash head-on with the incoming palms of Mahavarakana. Terrifying collision sounds reverberated throughout the space. The light of Buddha burst forth. Without exception, the void palms crumbled when faced with the palms of Mahavarakana. All the void palms shattered into pieces as the palms of Mahavarakana continued to charge forward and head straight towards Shunyan Arhat. Boom! 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 Menacing attacks cleared the space as they crashed towards Shunyan Arhat. However, right at this moment, beams of light of Buddha shot out into different locations. The area where Shunyan Arhat was reduced to dust under the attack of the palms of Mahavarakana. The flesh of Shunyan Arhat seemed to have been destroyed by it as well. However, the next moment, many figures of Shunyan Arhat popped up in different locations. They seemed to be his clones. Clearly, Shunyan Arhat was not injured by Yi Futian's attack. Void battle form against void battle form, exclaimed the various Buddhas. Their hearts were slightly stirred when they saw this scene. The user of the void battle form seemed omnipresent. Before this, Shunyan Arhat was not able to land an attack on Yi Futian. Now, Yi Futian's palms of Mahavarakana similarly could not hit Shunyan Arhat. The two of them seemed to have reached a stalemate. It was apparent that Shunyan Arhat was more powerful than the opponents that Yi Futian had encountered before. In the previous battles, once Yi Futian's powerful Buddhist superpowers were unleashed, he could crush his opponent. However, this time, even as the power of the dual battle form burst forth, he could not take down Shunyan Arhat. Both of them were proficient in Buddhist superpowers and had powerful battle forms. Hence, such a situation had occurred. However, although this battle was short, up to this point, the various Buddhas could tell that Yi Futian's comprehension of Buddhist doctrine was not inferior to Shunyan Arhat's own. His combat ability was similarly not weaker than that of the latter. Even with Shunyan Arhat's cultivation plane being higher than his, Yi Futian could still put up a fight. This made it apparent how outstanding Yi Futian was. This meant that if they were both on the same plane, Shunyan Arhat would have faced a crushing defeat. When Yi Futian sensed this, his heart was calm. He placed his palms together, as the sound of Buddha circled around him. The sound of Buddha reverberated in the entire space. Gradually, a gigantic Buddha also appeared. It seemed to be seizing control of the space from the gigantic Buddha, summoned by Shunyan Arhat. Besides that, the gigantic Buddha summoned by Yi Futian was accompanied by the sound of Buddha. The sound of Buddha contained a terrifying divine power that caused Shunyan Arhat's battle forms to tremble. This person can cultivate so many Buddhist doctrines simultaneously because his body was originally proficient in various powers of the Great Path such as flame, space, and sound. A Buddha exclaimed. The various Buddhas all nodded their heads slightly. Someone said, "He is indeed a rare genius. He is comparable to Donghuang the Great of the past." A senior Buddha refuted, "It's too high a praise to compare him with Donghuang the Great. Donghuang the Great had an unparalleled temperament, and he stood head and shoulders above the others of his generation. Aside from Emperor Yi Qing, he was uncontended. The Lord of all Buddhas praised him, and he soon reached the emperor level after that. He united the divine prefecture, and he has been unrivaled for centuries. If we want to pick someone who is on par with Donghuang the Great, the person has to be the devil emperor of the devil world, who has earned his fame preceding Donghuang the Great." Another Buddhist cultivator said, "I think that Yi Futian is not any weaker than Donghuang the Great of the past. If Donghuang the Great was here, he might not have done any better than Yi Futian. Nevertheless, both of them are top geniuses. Donghuang the Great of the past was also proficient in various law powers. He was also well-versed in Buddhist doctrine. Taking this point into consideration, that famous figure of the devil world is indeed the only one who is comparable to Donghuang the Great." The speaker equated Donghuang the Great with the devil emperor. The two of them were similar. They were both proficient in various law powers. Back then, the devil emperor created various powerful demonic arts. Each and every one of them was overbearing. He defeated all the others of his generation and ended the chaotic era in the devil world. Shenyan Arhat will most likely lose, someone commented as they looked toward the battlefield. The two gigantic battle forms were engaged in battle. However, as Yi Futian unleashed his battle form, he was also unleashing the wrathful Buddhist roar and the demon-slaying cries of dragons and elephants. Rumor has it that these two techniques were Buddhist doctrine created by an ancient Buddha when he was suppressing the turmoil in hell. When cultivated to their extremes, these two techniques would allow the cultivator to dominate hell. Rumble. Terrifying sounds could be heard. The various Buddhas looked up into the sky. They were all enveloped within the two gigantic Buddhas. These two gigantic Buddhas were battling to seize control over the space. Right now, the one summoned by Yi Futian had seized the upper hand and consumed the one summoned by Shenyan Arhat. At the same time, on the battlefield, Shenyan Arhat's various clones were under constant heavy bombardment. Shenyan Arhat's expression had already changed. The sound of intense tremors could be heard. His battle form was broken. In the sky above, blinding sunlight burst forth. From the heavens, a gigantic Buddha palm reached down below. It seemed to be the palm of the true Mahavarakana. This gigantic palm of Mahavarakana came bearing down. The remaining clones of Shenyan Arhat turned to dust. Shenyan Arhat's true body appeared. As he looked at the palm of Mahavarakana crashing down on him, his expression turned ugly. He raised both his hands, and the light of Buddha shone from him. He became an ancient Buddha that attempted to hold up the sky. Bang! The palm of Mahavarakana came crashing down and slammed Shenyan Arhat's figure to the ground. He was pushed underground. The terrifying aftershocks shook Spirit Mountain, sending dust flying into the air. On the surface, a gigantic palm print was left behind. The earth in the gigantic palm print appeared scorched. Shenyan Arhat was buried deep within the ground. He kept throwing up fresh blood, and his face was pale. Chapter 2483. The Final Opponent. Chapter 2483. The final opponent Shenyan Arhat was defeated. The various Buddhas looked towards the battlefield. Shenyan Arhat was the most talented disciple of Shenyan Buddha Lord. He had devoted himself to studying Buddhist doctrine for many years. In the entire Western Heaven, he was considered one of the most outstanding figures of his generation. Only a few other Arhats, as well as the direct disciples of the Lord of all Buddhas, could defeat him. Such an existence had actually been defeated by Yi Futian, who had a lower cultivation level. He had even been suppressed in terms of Buddhist superpowers. From the looks of it, Yi Futian was truly going to achieve imitating Donghuang the Great and defeating the various Buddhas. Shenyan Buddha Lord looked towards him. He had a cold look of disappointment in his eyes. His chosen successor had been defeated. For him, it was naturally an utter disgrace. Back then, his elder brother was among the various Buddhas defeated by Donghuang the Great. Ever since that battle, his elder brother had begun cultivating in seclusion away from the world. He was extremely close with his elder brother. The latter had always taken care of him. The incident back then was a great blow to him. He had always considered that battle centuries ago to be the shame of the Buddhist sections. Who would have thought that history would repeat itself today? Yi Futian set foot on Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven and sought the path of Buddhist doctrine. He challenged various Buddhas and defeated the successor of Shenyan Buddha Lord. However, Yi Futian came to Spirit Mountain openly with the valid reason of learning Buddhist doctrine from the Buddhas present. Shenyan Buddha Lord had no excuse to target Yi Futian. Moreover, he knew that among the Buddhas present, some of them were kind towards Yi Futian. They admired his talents and looked highly on him. Wutian Buddha Lord was one of them. He even assigned his disciple, Yumu, to welcome Yi Futian. Wutian Buddha Lord had a smile on his face throughout Yi Futian's battles with the Buddhas. He seemed to hold Yi Futian in high regard. One could figure this out based on the way Wutian Buddha Lord spoke about him. Furthermore, nothing in Western Heaven could escape the eyes of the Lord of all Buddhas. Occurrences on Spirit Mountain were no exception too. How would the Lord of all Buddhas respond after witnessing everything that happened here? Would he meet Yi Futian personally? When Shenyan Buddha Lord thought of this, he looked somewhere. Seated over there was a Buddha. This Buddha maintained a smile throughout the whole event as he sat on a futon. He quietly observed everything that happened. He spoke very little. His eyes became two lines as he smiled gently. He appeared exceptionally warm and made people feel comfortable around him. He was wearing a kasaya, and half of his chest could be seen. Prayer beads were hanging on his neck. As both his hands fingered the beads continuously, the prayer beads turned around his neck. Shinyan Buddha Lord put his hands together and bowed towards this Buddha. He said, "Buddha, may I consult your opinion regarding this youth?" Judging from Shinyan Buddha Lord's speech, one could tell that this Buddha Lord had extraordinary standing. Even Shinyan Buddha Lord was so polite with him by regarding him as Buddha and consulting his opinion. With a smile and wrinkly eyes, this Buddha Lord looked at Shinyan Buddha Lord and said, "I'm not worthy of the title Buddha. This youth has come to Spirit Mountain to seek the Buddhist path. Judging from his performance, he is very outstanding. As for the rest, it depends on whether he can make it to our level, and whether the Lord of all Buddhas is willing to meet him." When Shinyan Buddha Lord heard the other party's reply, he understood that the latter had no intention of saying much. This Buddha Lord was no ordinary figure. He was all-knowing, and could peek into the past and the future of other people. He knew Futian's fate. Besides that, he had profound Buddhist doctrine now that he had attained his status as a Buddha. He might even be able to see Futian's future. Shinyan Buddha Lord purposely inquired about Futian to get some information about Futian from this Buddha Lord. However, the other party was unwilling to reveal even a tiny bit of information. He casually steered the conversation in another direction. Of course, the Buddha Lord's response was befitting to his personality. It was normal for him to reveal nothing that he knew. Shinyan Buddha Lord didn't pester him either. He looked at Tongchan Buddha Lord and the others. The battle a few centuries ago is still fresh in our minds. Today is yet another day of sparring with Buddhist doctrine. Your disciples are all well-versed in Buddhist doctrine. Surely they are better than this disciple of mine. Why don't they stand out to join the battle? Let this outsider truly experience our Buddhist doctrine. His speech intended to goad the others into action. The hidden meaning behind his speech was clear. If they allowed Futian to reach them today, they would make it seem as though no cultivator in Western heaven was proficient in Buddhist doctrine. The various Buddhas looked ahead. They could see that Futian was still moving upwards. He was bathed in the brilliant light of Buddha. He seemed unstoppable. In the space below him, Shinyan Arhat remained where he was. It looked as though Futian had advanced by stepping over Shinyan Arhat's head. One could imagine the humiliation Shinyan Arhat was feeling right now. However, Futian paid no heed to it. He did not do this to other Buddhist cultivators, but he purposely shamed Shinyan Arhat. If Shinyan Arhat had emerged victorious instead, he would surely have done much worse to Futian. The various Buddhas had mixed feelings when they saw this scene. The battle today would certainly leave a permanent scar in Shinyan Arhat's heart. Futian advanced forward. No one emerged to stop him. He gradually approached the highest place, the highest heaven of Spirit Mountain. It was where the various Buddha Lords were. If Futian actually reached there, it meant that he was truly more capable than various Buddhas. Shinyan Buddha Lord frowned. Did all these people really plan to sit back and watch Futian succeed? Today various Buddhas had gathered. Among the younger generation, Shinyan Arhat was not the strongest cultivator. Yumu, for example, was very powerful. Unfortunately, he was a disciple of Wutian Buddha Lord and bore goodwill towards Futian. Naturally, he would not attack him. However, there were many other powerful figures under different Buddha Lords. The eyes of Shinyan Buddha Lord narrowed as he watched Futian progressing upwards and slowly approaching them. Could it be that he really needed to let Futian have his way? Right at this moment, on the second heaven, a figure emerged and stood in front of Futian. Futian was very close to reaching the top. The peak seemed to be within his reach. When Shinyan Buddha Lord saw the challenger emerge, he heaved a sigh of relief. At last someone came forward. Besides that, his worries were put to rest when he saw who the challenger was. The cultivator, who came forward, was not a disciple of this generation of Buddha Lords. He had been an Arhat for a few generations. His cultivation was definitely not any weaker than that of other Arhats. In fact, he was much stronger than most of them. There was nothing special about his identity. It could even be regarded as ordinary. However, he had maintained this ordinary status for more than 1,000 years. No one knew exactly how long he had been here. The crowd only knew that he was once an attendant of the Lord of all Buddhas. Back when the Lord of all Buddhas was still cultivating on Spirit Mountain, this Arhat organized scriptures for the Lord and ran errands for him. His duties included taking care of Spirit Mountain of Western Heaven. His identity as an attendant was naturally a lot lower when compared to that of other Arhats, who were direct disciples of the Buddha Lords. However, no one dared to look down on him. This point was proven based on how high up he was. The second heaven was a level where only Buddhas could stand. Rumor has it that this Arhat was dim-witted. Hence, even though he had been an attendant for the Lord of all Buddhas for many years, he had yet to break through the shackles and undergo the tribulation of the Great Path. This was the reason why he had stayed at the peak of his cultivation plane for such a long time. However, on this cultivation plane, no one among the Buddhist sects dared to claim that they could defeat him for sure. Chapter 2484. Humbled. Chapter 2484. Humbled. This monk was known as Bitter Zen. Rumor has it that he began following the Lord of all Buddhas when he was but an acolyte. Futian stopped in his tracks. When he saw Bitter Zen emerge, he sensed a faint pressure. Even though there was no powerful aura emanating from Bitter Zen's figure, his calm and indifferent temperament contained a dangerous will. Moreover, Futian himself knew clearly that since his opponent emerged after Shinyan Arhat was defeated, he would certainly be more powerful than him. I am Bitter Zen. Greetings, Benefactor Yi. Greeted Bitter Zen as he placed his palms together and bowed at Futian. He was courteous and respectful. Greetings, Master, replied Futian as he returned the gesture. Master Bitter Zen has followed the Lord of all Buddhas and cultivated under him for many years. He is revered amongst the Buddhist sections. Benefactor Yi, you need to be cautious, Wutian Buddha Lord said with a smile from the highest heaven. His introduction for Bitter Zen was different. The latter had been cultivating under the Lord of all Buddhas and was revered. Clearly, Bitter Zen was respected even among the Buddha Lord level figures. No one looked down on him at all, just because he had been the attendant of the Lord of all Buddhas. When Futian heard Wutian Buddha Lord say this, he was surprised. So this monk actually had such a background. He bowed once again and said, "It is an honor to receive personal instruction from you, Master." Wutian Buddha Lord, you speak too highly of me. I am but an attendant of the Lord of all Buddhas. I merely run errands. Benefactor Yi, you have only cultivated Buddhist doctrine for several months, since you came from the divine prefecture. Just like that, your Buddhist doctrine has surpassed the various Buddhas here. I am extremely impressed. Your comprehension of Buddhist doctrine is deep enough to have obtained the teachings of the dual battle form. Hence, I came forward to seek some pointers from you regarding Buddhist doctrine, said Bitter Zen humbly and politely. Both of them appeared exceptionally humble. They did not seem like two people who were about to engage in a huge fight. Master, after you, said Futian. Please, after you. After the two of them exchanged pleasantries, a dazzling light of Buddha radiated from both their figures. Futian's Mahavarakana battle form remained. He seemed to have become Mahavarakana and was blinding to look at. He raised his hand and pointed it forward. A palm of Mahavarakana charged towards Bitter Zen. This was naturally just an attack to test the waters. With the palm of Mahavarakana alone, Futian could not even defeat Shinyan Arhat. Bitter Zen would naturally have no issues dealing with it. Bitter Zen stood there, not moving an inch. The light of Buddha circled around him as his mouth moved slightly. No one could hear what he was uttering. However, the Buddhist voice reverberated throughout the space. Countless Buddhist runes flowed out of Bitter Zen's mouth. In an instant, a solemn air descended upon the land. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. The sound of Buddha circled around them. It was as though a Buddha had awakened. It seemed that there was only the Buddha present, and no evil powers could exist here. At the same time, Bitter Zen's figure was changing. His body turned golden and began to expand. Accompanied by the mantra, he became a gigantic true Buddha. He was even bigger than Futian's Mahavarakana battle form. It was the 6 syllables of truth. Yi Futian thought to himself as his heart trembled. The Buddhist 6 syllables of truth appeared simple, yet they were esoteric. Anyone could cultivate them, but only in form. It was impossible to comprehend the meaning of the 6 syllables of truth. Only the Buddhas who were proficient in Buddhist doctrine and had an extremely deep comprehension could understand its true essence. In the entire Western heaven, the number of Buddhas who successfully cultivated the 6 syllables of truth could be counted on one hand. They were all top-tier Buddhas, and Bitter Zen was actually one of them. Bang! The palm of Mahavarakana crashed into the gigantic golden figure of Bitter Zen. His golden figure did not budge at all. It was stable and firm. On the other hand, the palm of Mahavarakana immediately shattered. It was apparent how sturdy the golden body was. "It is the reality battle form," someone exclaimed. The hearts of the various Buddhas stirred when they witnessed this scene. It was as expected of Bitter Zen, the monk who had followed the Lord of all Buddhas for so many years. He had already cultivated the reality battle form to perfection. By merging the 6 syllables of truth and the reality battle form, his Buddha figure was indestructible and immovable. Yi Futian's palm of Mahavarakana was domineering. However, when it struck Bitter Zen's golden battle form, it shattered on its own. It could not move Bitter Zen's golden figure at all. This time, Yi Futian had truly encountered a powerful opponent. In the battles before this, the other Buddhist cultivators could not force Yi Futian's battle form to budge. Now it was his attack, which could not break Bitter Zen's golden body's defense. The tables had turned now. Yi Futian felt a pressure acting on him. It was to be expected of a master who cultivated under the Lord of all Buddhas. Once his opponent began attacking, Yi Futian could sense the strength of the other party's Buddhist doctrine. Under the effects of the 6 syllables of truth, the entire space seemed to be controlled by his opponent and contained powerful Buddhist doctrine. The 6 syllables of truth did not appear to have any power. However, their might was formless. They contained the utmost wisdom and were enhanced by powerful Buddhist doctrine. As the 6 syllables of truth expanded outwards, the entire spirit mountain was lit up with the light of Buddha. Endless light enveloped the battlefield. Formless might of Buddha was contained within the light. Yi Futian could actually sense the power of the various Buddhas, enhancing his opponent's power. At that moment, he could truly sense the terrifying pressure and the might of his opponent. Yi Futian had a stern expression. His void battle form appeared, and a gigantic Buddha enveloped the vast space. Figures of many Buddhas appeared in the surrounding space, all of them unleashing a powerful light of Buddha. Yi Futian attempted to unleash the powerful attack he had used against Shunyan Arhat again. However, the 6 syllables of truth did not yield. The gigantic golden Buddha that Bitter Zen had become had his eyes shut tightly. His palms were together in front of his chest. The syllables of truth reverberated throughout the sky. Endless light of Buddha coalesced above, and silhouettes of gigantic Buddhas appeared. What was even more terrifying was that the face of a Buddha seemed to form in the sky. It gazed down upon them. The entire sky had become the silhouette of a Buddha. It was just like how the face of great Emperor Ziwei had appeared in the starry world back then. That was not all. Down below, in 3 different directions, 3 powerful Buddhas appeared. They seemed to be the Trikaya, the 3 bodies of Buddha. Terrifying light emanated from these 3 figures. They immediately surrounded the gigantic Buddha summoned by Yi Futian. Aside from that, around the various Buddhas that Yi Futian had summoned, a sea of other Buddhas appeared. The various Buddhas had all appeared at once and surrounded the ones Yi Futian summoned. In every direction, Yi Futian was outmatched. Yi Futian opened his eyes and looked at the scene around him. Under the light of Buddha, the sound of Buddha circled around him, solemn and divine. This divine might landed on him without any murderous intent. There was only the unparalleled might of Buddha. It was as though the true Buddha had descended. When Yi Futian saw this scene, at first, he was somewhat reluctant. Then he felt a sense of relief. He looked towards Bitter Zen and placed his palms together. He then bowed slightly at Bitter Zen and said, "Master, your comprehension of Buddhist doctrine is deep. It is not something I can compare to. I admit my defeat." As Yi Futian said this, he immediately retracted his aura. The light of Buddha on his body instantly receded. He had no desire to compete. He knew that he was still far inferior to his opponent in terms of attainments in Buddhist doctrine. 1,000 years of hard work and cultivation was not something he could compete with using just dozens of days of effort. Chapter 2485. The Lord of All Buddhas. Chapter 2485. The Lord of All Buddhas Bitter Zen placed his palms together, and his light of Buddha retracted. In an instant, the silhouettes of Buddhas in the sky vanished, and everything returned to a calm state. It was as though nothing had happened. He bowed towards Yi Futian and said, I have spent a millennium on Spirit Mountain, and only managed to catch a glimpse of the path of Buddha. Benefactor Yi, you have merely cultivated Buddhist doctrine for dozens of days, and already have such high attainment. I am ashamed of myself. It was not quite fair to compare Yi Futian's dozens of days of contact with Buddhist doctrine with his own millennia spent on it. They were not even on the same level. However, it was with this background that Yi Futian made his way up here and defeated the various Buddhist cultivators. Although Yi Futian eventually admitted his defeat to Bitter Zen, in reality, he had only lost in terms of the duration spent on Buddhist doctrine. Bitter Zen was a monk who had followed the Lord of all Buddhas for more than a millennia. The influence of his surroundings greatly aided him in cultivating the Buddhist path. The various Buddhas watched the two humble men. This outcome was expected. After all, it was Bitter Zen who had stepped forward. Yi Futian imitated Donghuang the Great of the past. However, in the end, Yi Futian was not him. When Donghuang the Great came to the Western world, his cultivation was much stronger than that of Yi Futian, and he had also previously comprehended Buddhist doctrine for many years. If they disregarded his other abilities and only looked at his Buddhist doctrine attainment, Donghuang the Great was already a Buddha-level figure back then. It was only under such circumstances that Donghuang the Great had managed to defeat all the various Buddhas. It was normal for Yi Futian to fail at what the former had achieved. Moreover, the person who got in his way was Bitter Zen. It was already an extraordinary achievement for him to reach this stage and even defeat Shunyan Arhat. If it were any other person, it would have been nearly impossible for them to achieve what he had accomplished. Master Bitter Zen, you are too courteous. This person has come today to Spirit Mountain to challenge the Buddhist sections. If you did not step forward, he might have thought that no one in our sects could prove a match for him, said Shunyan Buddha Lord. When he saw Bitter Zen treating Yi Futian so politely, he felt a sense of dissatisfaction. He swept a glance at Yi Futian and said, Buddha is merciful. Today you came to cause trouble on Spirit Mountain. However, since it is all Buddha's fest, we will not find fault with you. Descend from the mountain. When he said this, a cold and indifferent look flashed past in his eyes. Under Buddha's clairvoyance, even if Yi Futian descended from the mountain, where could he go? Yi Futian would not be able to escape his heavenly eye. He would settle the score with Yi Futian after all Buddha's fest had ended. This cultivator from the divine prefecture had to remain in Western heaven. Although Yi Futian did not know what Shunyan Buddha Lord was thinking, he could sense the latter's animosity towards him. It was normal for Yi Futian to be defeated today. When he came here, he never thought that he would be able to defeat the various Buddhas. He had merely given it a try. In the end, he lost to Bitter Zen in the final battle. Of course, Yi Futian could accept this outcome. Since he had been defeated, he would need to leave soon. It was best that he left Western heaven before all Buddha's fest ended. He turned around and glanced towards Hua Qingqing. He revealed an apologetic look. However, Hua Qingqing was smiling and seemingly did not mind. Futian Buddha Lord was kind to us. Should we ask him to let you stay here and cultivate the path of Buddha? That way, you will have a chance to meet the Lord of all Buddhas in the future. Yi Futian asked Hua Qingqing over transmitted thoughts. If they left just like that, they wouldn't have the chance to meet the Lord of all Buddhas. If they missed this opportunity, who knows when they could return here? All that has happened on Spirit Mountain will not escape the eyes of the Lord of all Buddhas. If he is willing to see me, he will naturally do so. If he isn't, it would be meaningless to stay behind, Hua Qingqing replied softly. Yi Futian nodded his head slightly. Buddhist superpowers were miraculous. The Lord of all Buddhas was certainly proficient in many Buddhist techniques. Everything that had occurred here would surely be known to him. When Yi Futian heard Hua Qingqing's response, he knew that she was very clear about this, so he did not say any more. He turned to face the various Buddhas and said, "Today, I came to seek pointers on the path of Buddha, and have gained much insight. There is no limit to Buddhist doctrine. Many thanks for your guidance. I apologize for having disturbed you all. Farewell." He placed his palms together, and the light of Buddha flowed around his figure as he said this. He bowed towards the various Buddha lords and prepared to descend the mountain and leave. "Wait a moment." A voice called out just as Yi Futian was turning to leave. Yi Futian looked towards the person who had spoken. He was a Buddha lord who was seated at the very top. He narrowed his eyes and looked at Yi Futian with a smile. It was the Buddha lord who Xinyan Buddha lord had been very polite to and referred to as Buddha. "Buddha lord," Yi Futian greeted. He bowed when he heard the other party calling him. "Is there anything else?" Xinyan Buddha lord and the other Buddhas all turned towards the Buddha lord who had spoken. They were somewhat surprised. This Buddha lord rarely spoke. Now he had actually held Yi Futian back. What was he about to do? "Benefactor Yi, you will know in a moment," the Buddha lord said with a smile. He narrowed his eyes and looked up into the sky. Yi Futian felt somewhat curious. Wutian Buddha lord also smiled and looked up into the sky above Spirit Mountain. This Buddha lord cultivated omniscience. If he wanted Yi Futian to wait, he naturally had his reasons for doing so. "Is something above Spirit Mountain?" asked Yi Futian. He looked up but did not see anything. The mountain was quiet. Everyone was waiting. It seemed that everyone here paid attention to every word and act of the Buddha lord. Just then rainbow light descended from the sky. The next moment, the light enveloped Spirit Mountain. A gigantic Buddha figure appeared in the heavens above. Right now, the entire mountain was bathed in the divine light of Buddha. Seemingly realizing that something had occurred, the various Buddhas on Spirit Mountain all got up and bowed towards the heavens. They had respectful expressions and appeared pious. "Greetings, Lord of all Buddhas." "Greetings, Lord of all Buddhas." Their voices reverberated throughout Spirit Mountain. The various Buddhas were all bowing. Regardless of their level, all the Buddhas were in the same pose, bowing with their palms together. Yi Futian naturally understood who had arrived. Only the Lord of all Buddhas could make all the various Buddhas bow and welcome him simultaneously. Yi Futian's heart stirred. He was somewhat moved. The Lord of all Buddhas had actually come. That meant that the Buddha Lord before this had asked him to wait, because he knew that the Lord of all Buddhas was coming. When he realized this, Yi Futian also bowed and placed his palms together. Hua Qingqing looked up at the sky with her beautiful eyes at the Lord of all Buddhas. Seemingly noticing her gaze, the Buddha in the sky looked towards her and revealed a kind smile. Hua Qingqing immediately felt her heart tremble. She bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord of all Buddhas. I merely came to visit Spirit Mountain. Everyone, you need not be so ceremonious," said the Buddha in the sky to the various Buddhas below, as he placed his palms together. He appeared very polite. This scene moved Yi Futian. It appeared that the Buddhist sects indeed had different manners compared to other worlds. Just as the various Buddhas had said before this, although all life was equal, and the Buddhas were no exception, there was a difference in their comprehension of Buddhist doctrine. The Lord of all Buddhas did not have a high and mighty attitude, but his comprehension of Buddhist doctrine was the most profound among the Buddhist sections. Hence, he was the Lord of all Buddhas, and the various Buddhas bowed to him. Chapter 2486, Reincarnation. Chapter 2486, Reincarnation. As the Buddha light shone, all of the Buddhas shifted to make space for one position. That was the position above, and in the middle of them all. No one sat at that position before, because it had been reserved for the Lord of all Buddhas all along. As the Lord of all Buddhas descended, his figure appeared on that seat. He said to the Buddhas, "Buddhas, please take your seats." Everyone nodded and sat down one after another. Atop the skies, all of the cultivators had their gazes fixed on the Lord of all Buddhas. Yi Futian and Hua Qingqing were still standing there with bitter zen. At this point, Yi Futian was also examining the Lord of all Buddhas. His entire body shined magnificently. It was clearly no longer a body of a common man, but was the golden frame. Yi Futian had come face to face with the will of several great emperors, Emperor Yi Qing's remnant soul, and Donghuang the Great's projection, yet he couldn't tell whether or not the Lord of all Buddhas that he saw before him was his true form. However, this was probably the closest he had ever come to great emperor-level cultivators. Even if it weren't his true form, it was at least his incarnation. Buddha Lord. Bitter Zen put his palms together and bowed toward the Lord of all Buddhas. He was the apprentice child of the Lord of all Buddhas, and was considered close to the Lord. Bitter Zen, you have followed me in cultivation for so many years, and I considered you to have stepped foot on the Buddhist path. What do you think about having an exchange with our little friend Yi here, regarding the Buddhist doctrine? The Lord of all Buddhas smiled and asked. He appeared very amiable. There was no sign of majesty or grandeur typical of the great emperors. As the cultivators on the Spirit Mountain bathed under his Buddhist light, they all felt like they were being caressed the spring breeze. Perhaps that was the power of the great Buddha. Benefactor Yi is also fated with Buddhism. If he cultivates for just 10 years, his understanding of the Buddhist doctrine will surely surpass mine, Bitter Zen replied. When he said 10 years, Yi Futian didn't feel that there was anything wrong. Master Bitter Zen's understanding of the Buddhist doctrine was indeed extraordinary. Even if he was really given 10 years, he may not be able to surpass him. Bitter Zen's appraisal of Yi Futian was already really high. After all, he had cultivated under the Lord of all Buddhas for 1,000 years. The Buddhas present also understood the significance of Bitter Zen's evaluation of Yi Futian. The Lord of all Buddhas smiled and nodded. He looked toward Yi Futian and said, Yi Futian, you came to the Spirit Mountains this time for her, right? As he spoke, his gaze turned toward Hua Qingqing. A gentle smile continued to be present in his golden iris, along with a sense of sympathy. Yes, I did come for Hua Qingqing. Master Bitter Zen said that I was fated with Buddhism. Actually, it's related to her as well. I believe this connection with Buddhism was, in part, bestowed upon me by her, Yi Futian replied. Indeed. The Lord of all Buddhas nodded. A fate connected to Buddhism is a fate connected to the Buddha. Thus, being related to Hua Qingqing was Yi Futian's fated connection to Buddhism in itself. When the Lord of all Buddhas looked toward Hua Qingqing, Buddha light instantly started shining upon her. This light was gentle, and as it illuminated Hua Qingqing, it made her appear even more holy. It even seemed like the light of the Buddha started to emanate from her, as her entire body shone magnificently. It was akin to the light of a lamp. Her body levitated into the air, and came before the Lord of all Buddhas. The Lord reached out and placed his hand on her head. Instantly, a cylindrical light screen encircled Hua Qingqing. It was as though she was a female Buddha. All entities have spirits. In the past, even I didn't expect that you would awaken intelligence. Ancient Buddha Qingdang, you've accompanied me in cultivation for many years, so I gifted you an opportunity in the cycle of life and death, allowing you to reincarnate. That's why you have your current life. Now, have you recalled your memories? The Lord of all Buddhas said with a smile as he retracted his hand. Hua Qingqing put her palms together. A spot of light appeared between her brows. It looked like a lamp, and made her appear more holy. I was originally a lamp before, Hua Qingqing muttered, Lord Buddha. Obviously, she had recalled her past. The Lord of all Buddhas smiled and nodded slightly. Hua Qingqing turned, and looked toward Yi Futian. Her eyes were exceedingly clear and pure. Now that she had recalled her past life, it made sense that she favored the ancient Buddha Qingdang, because this had been her destiny all along. She was the ancient Buddha Qingdang in her past life. She was a lamp before the Buddha, and she had accompanied the ancient Buddha in his cultivation. Greetings, great Buddha. Bitter Zen bowed and paid his respects to Hua Qingqing. He put his palms together, and his expression was very solemn. He appeared exceptionally respectful. Greetings, great Buddha. Quite a number of Buddhist cultivators bowed to Hua Qingqing, with the exception of a few Buddha Lord-level cultivators, who had seen an incredible number of years in cultivation. While Hua Qingqing was young, it was only her age in her current life. Back when she cultivated alongside the Lord of all Buddhas, she had experienced a nearly indefinite period of time, living for longer than even Bitter Zen. After being by the Lord for such an incredibly long time, She could be truly said to have accompanied the Buddha Lord in cultivation. As such, even bitter Zen honored her by calling her Great Buddha. Among the Buddhas present there, most were considered her juniors. Xingyan Buddha Lord and others who were hostile toward Yi Futian were all startled. Of course they knew about the Buddhist lamp of the Lord of all Buddhas. But Hua Qingqing, she was the reincarnation of the Lord's Buddhist lamp? Back then, the Qingding accompanied the Lord of all Buddhas through his cultivation journey. As eons passed by, Qingding listened to countless years of Buddhist sutra and eventually gained intelligence. So the Lord of all Buddhas used his supreme command of the Buddhist doctrine to help this Buddhist lamp reincarnate as a human. This story was passed down in the Buddhism world all along, but no one expected that Yi Futian, who came to the Spirit Mountains today to consult about the Buddhist doctrine, had actually come for the Buddhist lamp. If that was the case, then they knew that within the world of Buddhism, it would be extremely difficult for them to target Yi Futian. Hua Qingqing bowed toward the Buddhas as well and said, "Greetings, Buddhas." Yi Futian smiled too as he saw this scene. When Hua Jiyu first mentioned this to him, he was in shock and disbelief as well. Hua Qingqing was actually the lamp before the Buddha, so it was no wonder she was able to protect Jiyu and prevent her spiritual soul from being obliterated. Now that he was able to send Hua Qingqing back to the Spirit Mountain to return under the Buddha Lord for cultivation, this whole saga had been brought to a satisfactory conclusion. In that case, I have completed my mission. Yi Futian smiled as he said. With the Buddha Lord's care, of course he wouldn't have to worry about Hua Qingqing anymore. Even across the entire world, there probably wasn't a single person capable of hurting her now. Hua Qingqing looked toward Yi Futian with a gentle smile. Then the Buddha Lord spoke. Perhaps it's too early to say that. Yi Futian was a little taken aback by what the Lord of all Buddhas said. He asked, "Please enlighten me." She had reincarnated for cultivation, and so she lives a different life now. She hasn't concluded all of her fated connections with the mortal world, so she won't be able to take refuge in Buddhism. The time hasn't arrived. The Lord of all Buddhas said with a smile. Yi Futian was startled. Did he mean to let Hua Qingqing continue to mature in the common world, and then cultivate there? Hua Qingqing, what do you think? The Lord of all Buddhas asked her. I'll heed the arrangements of the Lord, Hua Qingqing answered. The Lord of all Buddhas continued. I've helped you recall your memories from your past life this time. Back then, when you had just awakened your intellect, you had already been following alongside me for many years in cultivation. This is why you are proficient in the Buddhist doctrine and can help Yi Futian with his cultivation. Now that these memories have returned to you, you shall return to the mortal world to continue experiencing and developing. Upon the time your fate with the mortal world had ended, that is the day you will become a Buddha. Hua Qingqing didn't say anything else. She put her palms together and bowed, agreeing to the Buddha Lord's words in silence. Upon hearing this, Yi Futian also understood that it wasn't time for Hua Qingqing to return to the Spirit Mountain yet. With that, does that mean that he had made this trip for nothing? But through this, he had managed to find the confirmed identity of Hua Qingqing and help her to regain her memories. That alone was worth this journey. Chapter 2487, Cultivation on the Spirit Mountain. Chapter 2487, Cultivation on the Spirit Mountain. Yi Futian put his palms together and bowed toward the Lord of all Buddhas. He said, Thank you very much. My visit this time was a little discourteous, so I seek your forgiveness. I'll now bring Hua Qingqing down the mountain and return. No hurry, the Lord smiled and replied. Yi Futian, the Buddha of Destiny already said that you have been fated with Buddhism. It was an arduous journey to come to the Spirit Mountains and send Hua Qingqing back to restore her memories. Of course, the Buddha will not let you return empty-handed. Yi Futian was a little astounded. Xingyan Buddha Lord's expression revealed some agitation. Was the Lord of all Buddhas going to do the same thing as he did to Donghuang the Great and pass on the Buddhist doctrine to Yi Futian? A smile spread across Hua Qingqing's face. Not only did they manage to eliminate the dangers of this trip, but they had even turned mishap into opportunity. I see, this is the Buddha of Destiny. Yi Futian looked at the Lord of all Buddhas, who had his eyes narrowed. He guessed that this Buddha Lord must be an ancient Buddha, who had cultivated omniscience, mysterious and unfathomable. He wondered whether the Buddha Lord could actually get a glimpse of his destiny. At his level, even if he couldn't see everything, he could at least see a fraction of it. The Lord of all Buddha's gaze also landed on the Buddha of Destiny as he asked, "Great Buddha, which Buddhist superpower do you think is suitable for Yi Futian to practice?" Besides Hua Qingqing, Benefactor Ye's fated connection with Buddhism could also be a tinge related to Wutian Buddha Lord. The Buddha of Destiny's eyes narrowed as he smiled. Wutian Buddha Lord previously helped Yi Futian to defuse some dangers and let his student Yumu stay by Yi Futian's side. "Indeed," the Buddha Lord said. "If that's the case, then we shall teach celerity. Wutian Buddha Lord, what do you think?" "I'll heed the Buddha Lord's arrangements," Wutian Buddha Lord smiled and said. He did, in fact, have good intentions toward Yi Futian. Yi Futian was someone blessed by the heavens. If celerity were passed down to him, it would also benefit the promulgating of the Buddhist doctrine. "Yi Futian, are you willing?" The Lord of all Buddhas looked toward Yi Futian and asked. He wanted to impart celerity to Yi Futian, one of the 6 superpowers of Buddhism. Celerity was also known as teletransportation or willful travel. Cultivated at the highest level, it would allow the user to appear anywhere in the world at will. This was the ultimate cultivation in space and teleportation. Before this, the Buddha Lord asked the Buddha of Destiny whether there were deeper meanings to this. With the powers of the Lord of all Buddhas and the Buddha of Destiny, rather than the glimpse of his future that they could catch, could it be that they were imparting to him celerity to help him safeguard his life? Of course, regardless of the reason, cultivating one of the 6 Buddhist superpowers was an enormous opportunity in itself. I am humbled. Throughout this trip to Spirit Mountain, I have already learned a significant number of Buddhist doctrines. Now the Buddha Lord is willing to impart me one of the 6 Buddhist superpowers. I'm truly grateful. Yi Futian bowed down in gratitude. The Lord of all Buddhas nodded. As for the teaching of celerity, we'll have to trouble Wutian Buddha Lord. Is that all right? Wutian Buddha Lord bowed as well. Glad to be of service. Thank you very much, Wutian Buddha Lord. Yi Futian bowed toward Wutian Buddha Lord as well. This trip to the Buddhist world in the Western Heaven wasn't a smooth journey. They had encountered many setbacks and hindrances, were chased by cultivators wanting to kill them, and they had seen the destruction of the divine frame. Even at Spirit Mountain of the Western Heaven, there were still many great Buddhas who were hostile toward him. But the end result was still very satisfactory to him. Those like Lord of all Buddhas, Wutian Buddha Lord, Buddha of Destiny, and Master Bitter Zen were all very respectable Buddhist cultivators. Of course, Yi Futian wouldn't dwell on whether the Lord of all Buddhas had some ulterior motives in doing this. The Lord of all Buddhas was a great emperor-level cultivator. At this level, there was no need to cover up anything toward someone like Yi Futian. So naturally, the Buddha Lord would just do as he wished. All right, I have disturbed you, Buddhas. Feel free to continue. I shall now take my leave, the Lord of all Buddhas said. As his voice sounded, Buddhist light erupted, and his golden frame gradually turned into a phantom. His body just disappeared into thin air. Before the Buddhas could even react, he had already left. But the Buddhas weren't surprised. It was incredibly rare for the Lord of all Buddhas to show himself. He only appeared on Spirit Mountain because of Yi Futian and Hua Qingqing. Moreover, this wasn't his true form in the first place. After the Lord of all Buddhas left, the Buddhas were all left with different thoughts. Benefactor Yi and Benefactor Hua should stay on Spirit Mountain and attend the All Buddhas Fest. It's about to come to an end anyway, Tianyin Buddha Lord said with a smile. Several other Buddhas nodded in agreement. Hua Qingqing was the lamp of the Buddha Lord, and since Yi Futian had sent her to the Spirit Mountain, there was nothing wrong with her attending the All Buddhas Fest. Congratulations to Benefactor Yi, Yainyan Arhat said with a smile. Yi Futian nodded and thanked him. Yumu, who was standing on the side, also nodded to Yi Futian to pay respects. Yi Futian put his palms together and returned the greeting. Tianyin Arhat then smiled and said, "Please take a seat, Yi Benefactor." "Thank you very much." Yi Futian wasn't too reserved and walked to the position beside Tianyin Arhat. Hua Qingqing wanted to follow him, but Wutian Buddha Lord said, "Great Buddha once accompanied the Lord of all Buddhas in cultivation, so please sit here instead." Hua Qingqing hesitated for a bit, but when she saw Yi Futian nodding at her, she didn't think too much about it. She went to the highest heaven and sat in the seat beside Wutian Buddha Lord. "Congratulations to benefactor Yi." Tongchan Arhat also looked toward Yi Futian and spoke with a smile on his face. Yi Futian looked at him a little alarmed. He controlled his inner thoughts and didn't overthink, so the others wouldn't read his thoughts. The All Buddhas Fest continued, but everyone now had their own agendas and thoughts, and the atmosphere wasn't quite there. As the 10,000th year of the All Buddhas calendar arrived, Buddhist light that spanned thousands of miles shrouded the entire Spirit Mountain. This day, many Buddhist cultivators set off from Spirit Mountains and headed toward the Western Heaven to promulgate the Buddhist doctrine. The entire Western Heaven was lit up with liveliness on this spectacular occasion. On this day, the great Buddhas also left one after another to return to their own cultivation areas. Yi Futian didn't leave. Atop Spirit Mountain, Yi Futian sat before an ancient temple and cultivated with his eyes closed. Beside him, Hua Qingqing was sitting there as well, and Buddhist light encircled her. There seemed to be Buddhist halos behind her, appearing incredibly divine and holy. The Buddhist light also illuminated Yi Futian's body. Before them, a great Buddha sat. It was Wutian Buddha Lord. He was passing his teachings to Yi Futian just now, imparting to him one of the 6 Buddhist superpowers, celerity. After a while, Yi Futian opened his eyes. He put his palms together toward Wutian Buddha Lord and said, "Thank you, Buddha Lord, for your teachings." "How are you feeling?" Wutian Buddha Lord asked. "The Buddhist doctrine has no ending, and celerity isn't something that I can learn and understand overnight. I'm afraid I will need to go through a long period of perceptive cultivation. At the same time, I will need to coordinate it with other Buddhist doctrines to stand a chance of mastering it," Yi Futian replied. "I see you already understand." Wutian Buddha Lord smiled and nodded. The cultivation of the 6 Buddhist superpowers does indeed require the reinforcement of other Buddhist doctrines to help comprehension. In this world, perhaps only the Lord of all Buddhas have cultivated celerity to mastery. Even I still have a long way to go. Mastery over celerity meant transcending the physical limits of this world. That was indeed nearly impossible. As for time, I suggest you cultivate on the Spirit Mountain for a period of time. Wait until you have reached a certain level in celerity before leaving," Wutian Buddha Lord added. "Thank you very much, Buddha Lord." Yi Futian nodded. That was his plan as well. Chapter 2488. Saint Jinshan returns. Chapter 2488. Saint Jinshan returns. The light of Buddha shone on Spirit Mountain. The surroundings were quiet and peaceful. The entire area was veiled like a sanctuary. Dazzling colorful light poured down on one of the peaks of Spirit Mountain. A white-haired figure sat cross-legged with his eyes shut as he cultivated. Behind him were 2 other silhouettes sitting quietly and cultivating. Both of them were absolute beauties, and appeared even more divine under the light of Buddha. One of the women was actually shrouded in halos of the light of Buddha. She was like a bodhisattva with transcendent beauty. She gave off an immaculate aura. The other woman seemed to be an otherworldly goddess. Their temperaments were completely different. These 2 women were naturally Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing. Since Yi Futian had remained to cultivate on Spirit Mountain, he had gone to Western Heaven to bring over Hua Jiyu and the others. Now Hua Jiyu, Chen Yi as well as a few junior figures were all cultivating on Spirit Mountain. Up until today, they had been cultivating on Spirit Mountain for 3 years. In the past 3 years, Hua Jiyu and the others also read Buddhist scriptures. They did not purposely cultivate the path of Buddha and Buddhist superpowers, but various techniques were related after all. Moreover, Buddhist scriptures were extremely profound. They could be enlightening. Occasionally, some things that they did not comprehend before could suddenly become extremely clear. Hence, these 3 years of cultivation had been extremely beneficial for them. Of course, the person who had improved the most was undoubtedly Hua Qingqing. In her previous life, she had been a Buddhist lamp who had accompanied the Lord of all Buddhas in his cultivation. He had recited many Buddhist scriptures to Qingdang. This caused Qingdang to gain sentience in her previous life. Now that memories of her previous life had awakened, the various Buddhas crowned her a Buddha. Her cultivation improved by leaps and bounds every day. She even transcended the original cultivation rules and kept leaping past planes. In another location, Blind Tai was cultivating under a golden waterfall that seemed to be formed from the flowing light of Buddha. At that moment, a silhouette suddenly appeared near him. Blind Tai raised his eyebrows, seemingly sensing something. He turned towards the person who had appeared. However, the next moment, he did not sense anything in that direction. It was as though no one had ever been there. Were his senses playing tricks on him? Blind Tai thought to himself. He felt somewhat strange. By right, his sense would not be mistaken. Then what was it? In another location below a pagoda, a few silhouettes were sitting there cultivating. Around them were quite a few Buddhas. These figures were rather young, but their temperaments were astounding. They were Feng Xiyuan and the youths. Just then, a silhouette appeared behind them. The four of them did not sense the figure at all. They were still immersed in their own cultivation. Very quickly, the figure vanished again, as though it had never been there. On the ancient golden peak, an illusory figure appeared where Futian sat. It was his own illusory figure. Right then, his illusory figure merged back with his original body as he quietly sat there. It was as though he had never left the place and had always been sitting there cultivating. In the surrounding space, one could not even detect any changes in the power of the great path of space. Hua Qingqing, who was seated behind Futian, cast him a glance. Her gaze revealed a faint smile. Right then, Futian also opened his eyes. He gazed down at the scenery below Spirit Mountain and mumbled. As expected, this celerity superpower is miraculous. I can use it to go about without leaving any traces. Even those with cultivation not weaker than my own have difficulty sensing my presence. If I were to attack them, I would certainly catch them off guard. It is somewhat terrifying to think about it. Hua Qingqing said. All 6 Buddhist superpowers are all miraculous. When you reach a higher cultivation plane, your celerity will become even more powerful. When that happens, you can go anywhere you want in the world. The heavens and earth will no longer bind you. Where did you go just now? Hua Jiyu asked curiously. In their eyes, Futian had only disappeared for an instant before returning to his spot. It was as though he had never left. However, they naturally knew that Futian was cultivating celerity and had gone somewhere in that instant. I went to many places, replied Futian as he turned around and looked at Hua Jiyu and Hua Qingqing. Hua Jiyu's beautiful eyes revealed a look of surprise. Futian had already gone to many places in that instant? Such speed was considered terrifying. Even if one cultivated the great path of space, it was impossible to pull off such a feat right then. A figure suddenly appeared where they were. It was Yumu. Yumu similarly cultivated celerity and could come and go without a trace. Without any signs of the power of the great path of space, he had immediately appeared here. Master, greeted Futian as he got up and bowed slightly. Benefactor Yi, replied Yumu as he returned the gesture. I have something to inform you. Back in Western Heaven, you previously came into conflict with Jinshan Temple, and Saint Jinshan went missing after the incident. Not long ago, Saint Jinshan returned to Jinshan Temple. He has gotten wind that you are cultivating here on Spirit Mountain, and is already on his way over. I believe he will arrive soon. So he did not die, Futian mumbled. However, this was within expectations. Of course, although he had not killed Saint Jinshan, he had heavily injured the latter. Saint Jinshan must have recovered recently for him to have only returned to Jinshan Temple now. Now Futian had already settled down on Spirit Mountain. Even though he had yet to establish a base here, he had long left Western Heaven. Despite that, Saint Jinshan was actually coming to Spirit Mountain to find him. It was obvious how deep his grudge ran. In the battle back then, most of the cultivators of Jinshan Temple were killed. Only Saint Jinshan had escaped with severe injuries. Jinshan Temple was already a shadow of its former self. This resulted in the deep hatred Saint Jinshan bore against Yi Futian. This score needed to be settled. Saint Jinshan was also originally from a Buddhist sect. It was not strange for him to come to Spirit Mountain. Of course, Benefactor Yi need not worry. On Spirit Mountain, it is impossible for Saint Jinshan to do anything to you, said Yimu, comforting Yi Futian. Yi Futian naturally also understood this. He was a cultivator whom the Lord of all Buddhas had received. The latter had allowed him to cultivate one of the 6 Buddhist superpowers on Spirit Mountain. Under such circumstances, if Saint Jinshan came to Spirit Mountain to kill Yi Futian, how would the Lord of all Buddhas punish him? Another figure dashed over. This time it was Bitter Zen. When he arrived, he placed his palms together and bowed towards Hua Qingqing, saying, "Greetings, Buddha." The cultivators of Spirit Mountain still maintained absolute respect towards Hua Qingqing. It was so even for Bitter Zen, who had followed the Lord of all Buddhas. Hua Qingqing was the Buddhist lamp accompanying the Lord of all Buddhas in his cultivation for countless eons. "Greetings, Master Bitter Zen," responded Hua Qingqing as she returned the gesture. Yi Futian similarly greeted him. Bitter Zen looked towards Yi Futian and said, "Saint Jinshan is already making his way across the ocean. He will arrive at Spirit Mountain soon. However, Benefactor Yi may cultivate in peace. On Spirit Mountain, nothing will happen to you." "Many thanks, Master," thanked Yi Futian politely. Master Bitter Zen must have come to put his mind at ease. Even Saint Jinshan could not do as he pleased on Spirit Mountain. Chapter 2489, Seeking the Buddha. Chapter 2489. Seeking the Buddha. Many Buddhas suddenly appeared on Spirit Mountain. In Western Heaven, Spirit Mountain was the center for those who sought the path of Buddha. Each Buddha had their own cultivation courts, and not all of them cultivated on Spirit Mountain. However, the cultivation courts of the various Buddhas were connected with Spirit Mountain and could easily access the latter. Of course, this was a privilege granted only to Buddhas of very high standing. This time, the various Buddhas came over because they had caught wind of some news. Saint Jinshan was alive and had returned to Jinshan Temple. Now, he was heading over to Spirit Mountain to settle the score with Yi Futian. Based on the news they received, back during the battle when Saint Jinshan led his forces to take down Yi Futian, his forces had been destroyed. The cultivators of Jinshan Temple had all fallen, and only Saint Jinshan had escaped. However, he was also gravely injured. He had not appeared in public for several years, until he recently returned to Jinshan Temple. They speculated that, until now, Saint Jinshan's injuries had yet to fully recover. There would certainly still be some lingering ailments. However, no one would be able to sit still when such grievances had been committed against them. Hence, many Buddhas had come to Spirit Mountain beforehand. They wanted to see how this grudge would end. Yi Futian's group was also waiting there. Not long after, there was a disturbance on Spirit Mountain. Saint Jinshan had arrived. On the ancient golden peak, Yi Futian could sense many powerful auras landing on him. It was apparent that the various Buddhas were watching him. At the same time, far off in the distance, an extremely terrifying aura swept over the area. A powerful resentment appeared over the sacred lands of the divine Spirit Mountain, faintly disrupting the peaceful environment here. Spirit Mountain was the sacred land of the world of Buddhism. Ordinary people would not dare to act so presumptuously here. However, Saint Jinshan was originally from a Buddhist sect. His standing was not low, so he dared to act this way. A short while later, Yi Futian and his group saw a silhouette appear before them. Saint Jinshan stood before the ancient golden peak. His gaze instantly locked on to Yi Futian. He had an ice-cold look in his eyes. The murderous intent in his eyes was clear as day. However, not far in front of Yi Futian, another figure stood. It was Bitter Zen. Next to Yi Futian, Hua Qingqing also stood quietly. Now, Hua Qingqing's position among the Buddhist sects was outstanding. Even Buddha Lord-level figures referred to her as Buddha. "Greetings, Master Bitter Zen." Saint Jinshan greeted Bitter Zen as he nodded his head slightly. Although he was arrogant, he was still very polite towards the Lord of all Buddha's attendant, not daring to step out of line at the slightest. "Greetings, Saint Jinshan." replied Bitter Zen as he returned the gesture without an ounce of arrogance. Master Bitter Zen, this man killed many members of Jinshan Temple a few years ago. Even the deputy lord of Jinshan Temple fell to his hands. Jinshan Temple suffered severe losses, and I barely made it out with my life, said Saint Jinshan. Later on, I heard that this man relied on the name of a Buddhist lamp, which reincarnated into a Buddha to cultivate on Spirit Mountain. Hence, I specifically came over here to take a look. I wanted to see how such a man, who stirred up such a huge storm in 6 desires heaven and slaughtered so many people, could cultivate the path of Buddha. Saint Jinshan, quell your anger, said Bitter Zen as he placed his palms together and bowed towards Saint Jinshan. What occurred back then was all because of cause and effect. Saint Jinshan, you sowed the seeds yourself, so you also had to reap what you sow. Now that you are here, you can cultivate on Spirit Mountain for a period of time to resolve the hostility in your heart with Buddhist doctrine. That way, you might be able to get rid of your obsession. Bitter Zen continued. As for Benefactor Yi, the Lord of all Buddhas has arranged for him to cultivate on Spirit Mountain. It is because this is Benefactor Yi's fate with Buddha. Bitter Zen directly stated that this was arranged by the Lord of all Buddhas. The latter was the leader of the world of Buddhism. Nothing in Western heaven could escape his eyes. He naturally knew what had happened back then. Bitter Zen did not need to say more. Saint Jinshan should be able to read between the lines. Saint Jinshan naturally understood what he meant. Bitter Zen stated that Yi Futian had done no wrong, and that he should reflect on his actions while studying Buddhist scriptures. He was a Buddhist, but he had always been occupied with establishing his own force. His relationship with the Buddhist sects was not that close. However, his elder brother, Tongchan, was a top Buddha lord. All right, since the Lord of all Buddhas has arranged it, I will not do anything. However, away from Spirit Mountain, this personal vendetta still stands. I beg the forgiveness of the Lord of all Buddhas in advance, declared Saint Jinshan. His tone was not polite at all. The Buddhist sects were different from sects in other worlds. In other worlds, the underlings were subordinate to the great emperor-level figures. None of them would dare act so presumptuously to their superiors. However, the Lord of all Buddhas was merciful and did not interfere with worldly matters. Everything obeyed the laws of causality and fate. He would not force anything to happen nor interfere with it happening. Beyond Spirit Mountain, the Lord of all Buddhas would not meddle in worldly affairs. Also, the law enforcers of the world of Buddhism did not look kindly on Yi Futian. Jinshan, you overstep your bounds, a voice called out. Saint Jinshan turned around and saw a Buddha appear. It was Tongchan Buddha Lord. Tongchan Buddha Lord, Saint Jinshan, and Lord Initial Zen were all under the same master. Back in the day, they had all cultivated under the same ancient Buddha. However, each of them chose their own cultivation path, and they weren't that close. Tongchan Buddha Lord was of very high standing. Be it Saint Jinshan or Lord Initial Zen, neither of them was worthy of his attention. Nevertheless, Tongchan Buddha Lord did not have a good impression of Yi Futian either. After all, they were still from the same sect. Initial Zen was killed by Yi Futian. Jinshan had nearly perished as well. Forgive me, elder brother, said Saint Jinshan as he bowed towards Tongchan Buddha Lord. He appeared extremely polite. They did not seem like ordinary brothers. Tongchan Buddha Lord cast a glance at him and said, I know why you have come. You have yet to recover from your injuries. You wish to head to Veduria Pure World, yes? Elder brother, please help me, Saint Jinshan replied with a bow. He naturally could not hide this from Tongchan Buddha Lord, as the latter could read the minds of others. Veduria Pure World was an independent world in the world of Buddhism. The master of Veduria Pure World was an ancient Buddha, Medicine Buddha Lord. Medicine Buddha Lord was revered. Even the Lord of all Buddhas would be very polite towards him. He could be considered a true relic of the world of Buddhism. He rarely appeared in public, not even appearing during All Buddha's Fest. Only a few of his disciples had attended the festival. Although Saint Jinshan's cultivation was powerful, and his position in the world of Buddhism was high, Veduria Pure World was still not a place that he could visit as he pleased. He still needed the help of Tongchan Buddha Lord to get there. On Spirit Mountain, There was a passageway that led to Veduria Pure World. He has yet to recover from his injuries, and wishes to see Medicine Buddha Lord. Hua Qingqing told Yi Futian over transmitted thoughts. These past few years, Yi Futian had developed a greater understanding about the top figures in the world of Buddhism. Medicine Buddha Lord was considered a legendary existence, a true ancient Buddha. From the looks of it, Saint Jinshan had yet to recover from his injuries back then. Hence, he wanted to head over to Veduria Pure World to seek treatment from Medicine Buddha Lord. Alright, I will help you. However, whether or not Medicine Buddha Lord is willing to treat you is up to your fate, replied Tongchan Buddha Lord in an indifferent tone. Elder brother, thank you for your help. Saint Jinshan responded with a bow. Follow me, Tongchan Buddha Lord instructed. Saint Jinshan stepped forward and followed him. Before he left, he did not forget to turn around and sweep a glance at Yi Futian. Over transmitted thoughts, he said, now that you no longer have the divine body, even if you have cultivated Buddhist doctrine on Spirit Mountain, what can you do? You'd better pray that you'll make it out of Western Heaven alive. Chapter 2490, Years Old. Chapter 2490. Years old. Yi Futian watched as Saint Jinshan left. His expression was calm. After the other party left, he said, it appears that I am not the main reason why Saint Jinshan came to Spirit Mountain. The various Buddhas also realized this. It turned out that Saint Jinshan had come to Spirit Mountain to meet Medicine Buddha Lord. It seemed that his injuries were very severe. With his cultivation, it might be that he couldn't recover from it on his own. Hence, he needed the aid of Medicine Buddha Lord. Still, you should be careful, mumbled Chen Yi as he walked up next to Yi Futian. Yi Futian nodded his head. Saint Jinshan's threat was still ringing in his ears. Saint Jinshan's main reason for coming here was to seek treatment. His secondary goal was to deal with Yi Futian. As long as he had the opportunity, Saint Jinshan would naturally not let Yi Futian go. The grudge between them was established, and not just in Western Heaven. Most likely, even if Yi Futian returned to the Divine Prefecture, Saint Jinshan would not let him escape. After all, without the divine body, Yi Futian couldn't go against Saint Jinshan. Spirit Mountain is a place for quiet cultivation. Everyone, please return to your own cultivation courts, said Bitter Zen, as he walked up before the ancient peak, and bowed into the distance with his palms placed together. Although there was no one before him, in reality, the various Buddhas were all looking to where he was. He was asking the various Buddhas to leave. Very soon, the Buddhas retracted their auras. Seeing that the incident had been resolved so easily, they naturally did not see the need to remain here. All of them left one after another. Benefactor Yi, you may continue cultivating in peace, Bitter Zen said as he turned to face Yi Futian. Many thanks, master, replied Yi Futian as he bowed back at Bitter Zen. Bitter Zen and Yimu then bid farewell and left. Chani walked up beside Yi Futian and asked, what do you plan to do now? Yi Futian was marked by Saint Jinshan. If he remained in Western Heaven, he needed to be on his guard at all times. If he took the opportunity to leave now, he might be able to return to the Divine Prefecture before Saint Jinshan recovered from his injuries. Yi Futian replied, since Saint Jinshan wants to kill me, he probably won't let this opportunity slip past him so easily. If I leave, we might be stalked. After all, Saint Jinshan should be well aware that if Yi Futian returned to the Divine Prefecture, it wouldn't be as easy to kill him there as it was in Western Heaven. If Yi Futian were in Saint Jinshan's shoes, he would have arranged for Yi Futian to be stalked. So, you plan to continue cultivating in Western Heaven? Chenyi further inquired. Responded Yi Futian as he nodded his head. He would first reach the 9th tier of the Renhuang Plain. Even if he returned to the Divine Prefecture, his main goal would still be to continue cultivating. It was a rare fateful encounter for him to be able to cultivate on Spirit Mountain. Aside from cultivating celerity, his aim was to reach the final tier of the Renhuang Plain. That way, when he returned to the Divine Prefecture, he could do as he pleased and need not be restricted by others. All right, answered Chun Yi as he nodded his head. Spirit Mountain was indeed very suitable for cultivating. After they made their decision, their group continued cultivating here. The peaceful mountain seemed to make them forget the flow of time. In the blink of an eye, Futian welcomed his 100th year of life. Before the ancient peak, Futian gazed at the golden sea of clouds. Hua Jiyu sat beside him, accompanying him in silence. "It has been 100 years, whispered Hua Jiyu with a smile. Both of them were the same age. They were now 100 years old. 100 years passed by in a flash, replied Futian as he smiled. He recalled the time when they had met in Qingzhou Academy in the city of Qingzhou. It felt like a dream that had lasted for decades. Although it passed in a flash, we have also changed greatly since then, said Hua Jiyu with a smile. The times they spent during their youth in the city of Qingzhou were so happy. Everything had changed since then. They also never imagined that they would spend their 100th year alive on Spirit Mountain, the holy land of Western Heaven. Although we have changed in the end, we are still together, said Futian in a gentle tone as he hugged Hua Jiyu. Ever since they knew each other, they had been apart longer than they had been together. Fortunately, they were still a couple. They would remain together forever. Responded Hua Jiyu as she nodded her head gently. She leaned into Futian's embrace and closed her eyes. She did not move, seemingly quietly falling asleep. After looking at his lover in his embrace, Futian gazed out to the golden sea of clouds. It was as beautiful as a dream. During his first 100 years of cultivation, he had pursued the peak of the Runhuang Plain. For the next 100 years, he would aim for the peak of cultivation. He also closed his eyes and enjoyed the peace and quiet of the moment. In the distance, Hua Qingqing's beautiful gaze revealed a faint smile as she watched this peaceful scene. She turned around and did not disturb them. She then saw Fang Siyuan and the others peeping. When they saw Hua Qingqing smiling at them, they quickly scurried away. No one disturbed Futian and Hua Jiyu from enjoying their time together. They watched as the two of them enjoyed this peace that was hard to come by. The golden sea of clouds shone with the light of Buddha. The clouds kept shifting. Waves of rainbow light shone down on Futian and Hua Jiyu. The scene was like a painting. It was a peaceful sight to behold. This scene lasted for a long while. They seemed detached from the world around them. No matter how the golden clouds shifted, they did not move at all. They seemed to have entered a state of meditative consciousness. A few days later, Hua Qingqing, Chen Yi, and the others looked at the two of them from afar. Someone asked in a low voice, "What's going on?" "They are one with nature. They merge with the heavens and the earth," Hua Qingqing explained softly. This is what happens when someone enters the state of meditative consciousness. When a cultivator enters into this state, it's easier for them to achieve enlightenment. Perhaps this is a fateful encounter for them. Chen Yi nodded in agreement. The changes in the sea of clouds intensified as the clouds shifted frenziedly. They could faintly sense an aura of the great path flowing in the sky. This caused Chen Yi and Hua Qingqing to reveal a surprised expression. This was a sign. Who was about to break through to the next plane? Was it Futian? Or was it Hua Jiyu? There were howling winds and churning clouds in the sky above Spirit Mountain. A terrifying aura flowed in the air. The golden light of Buddha dispersed, and dull thundering sounds could be heard. The sacred space was covered with a layer of haze. The aura was menacing, causing people's hearts to tremble in fear. "It's a divine tribulation," Chen Yi mumbled as a glint of surprise flashed past in his eyes. The person who was about to experience a breakthrough was Hua Jiyu. If Futian were experiencing a breakthrough, he would advance to the 9th tier of the Runhuang Plain. There would not be any divine tribulation involved. Only if Hua Jiyu faced a breakthrough would the divine tribulation of the Great Path occur. Futian sensed something. He opened his eyes and took a look at the sky. Joy flashed past his eyes. Hua Jiyu, who was in his embrace, similarly opened her eyes. They looked at each other and smiled. Then she left his arms. Clearly, both of them were well aware of what was going to happen. Futian thought to himself. He did not expect Jiyu to be the first of them to experience the divine tribulation of the Great Path. However, after recalling Hua Jiyu's experience and fateful encounters, he felt that her advancement was natural. Hua Jiyu had a deeper understanding of the teachings of the great emperor compared to him. Back when she returned to his side in the divine prefecture, she was already at the peak of the Runhuang Plain. Hua Jiyu stepped forward and marched towards the sea of clouds. Be careful, reminded Yi Futian softly. He had witnessed how Emperor Shi experienced his divine tribulation. The process was perilous. Hua Jiyu smiled and nodded her head. She seemed unworried about it. Chun Yi and Hua Qingqing approached them. Blind Tai, Fang Xiyuan, and the rest joined them too. All of them watched as Hua Jiyu walked towards the sea of clouds. Countless people exhausted their lives wanting to experience the divine tribulation and advance to the next level. Yet they couldn't achieve their goal. Who would have thought that Hua Jiyu had actually managed to do so after having an enlightenment? Why haven't you broken through to the next plane? Chunyi asked Yi Futian. Right. Even Masteress is undergoing the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Yet Master has yet to advance to the next plane, said Fang Xiyuan with a smile. He was teasing his master. Yi Futian revealed a pondering look. Before this, when he was in the state of meditative consciousness, he felt that he had entered into a miraculous realm. With his current ability, he should be able to break through to the next plane. However, he seemed to encounter some hindrance that prohibited him from doing so. Up until now, he had yet to get to the bottom of this problem. Chapter 2491, Tribulation. Chapter 2491. Tribulation. However, right now, Yi Futian was not in the mood to think about breaking through to the next plane. He was somewhat worried. Although Hua Jiyu undergoing a tribulation was a good thing, in a sense, doing so was not truly breaking through to the next plane. The current heavenly law did not allow Renhuangs with flawless great paths to continue advancing. Hence, the tribulation of law descended upon them when they attempted to do so. It was extremely dangerous. Conversely, when cultivators without flawless great paths advanced, that was considered truly breaking through to the next plane. They merged with the heavenly law, and were even called fake emperors. Yet in reality, they were far inferior to great emperors. Great emperor-level figures were existences akin to deities in ancient times. Fake emperors could not compare to them. Ordinary fake emperors would have difficulty defeating even a 9th-tier Renhuang with a flawless great path. Back when the original realm went through the crisis, many 9th-tier Renhuangs descended from the divine prefecture. Figures from the original realm, at the level of Lord Taishian, could not hold a candle to them. The gap between their levels of power was apparent. Yi Futian had witnessed Emperor Shi undergoing his tribulation on Turtle Deity Island. Even with Emperor Shi's ability back then, it was difficult for him to withstand the power of the tribulation, especially the Sword of Law which appeared at the end. Emperor Shi was nearly killed by the Sword of Law. The Black Turtle of Turtle Deity Island appeared in the nick of time and took the terrifying slash on behalf of Emperor Shi. Only then did he manage to pass the divine tribulation of the Great Path. Of course, Hua Jiyu was different. In Yi Futian's opinion, Hua Jiyu was not any weaker than Emperor Shi of the past. She was a successor of a great emperor. Moreover, she had a deep understanding of the teachings she received. She also improved a lot while cultivating on Spirit Mountain these past few years. Her comprehension of Buddhist doctrine greatly aided her in her cultivation. Exactly because of the reasons above, Hua Jiyu had this opportunity to break through the shackles of her current plane. Therefore, even though Yi Futian was slightly worried about her, he was not afraid. Deep down, he believed that Hua Jiyu could succeed in this divine tribulation of the Great Path. It was just that there was still some risk. The two of them were very close. It was normal for Yi Futian to be worried for her. More and more menacing phenomena appeared in the sky above Spirit Mountain. The light of catastrophe gathered, churned and roared. It penetrated the light of Buddha, which hovered over Spirit Mountain. Great Buddha-level figures appeared, followed by the sound of Buddha, reverberating in the heavens and the earth. Then, the light of Buddha enveloped Spirit Mountain, shielding the entire mountain with a layer of golden shimmer. This caused it not to be harmed by the divine tribulation. Otherwise, Spirit Mountain would be perforated with holes under the power of the divine tribulation. Hua Jiyu stood at the center of the storm. Her entire body was shining. She was as divine and beautiful as a goddess. The light of catastrophe that gathered penetrated the space. It was as though the end days had arrived and overshadowed the peaceful divinity of Spirit Mountain. Even though Spirit Mountain was enveloped in defensive power, an intense rumbling could be felt on it now. It's unexpected for a cultivator, who hasn't cultivated Buddhist superpowers, to undergo a tribulation on Spirit Mountain. This is interesting, commented a great Buddha while smiling. Right. This is the first time something like this has occurred, a Buddha responded. At this moment, many divine swords appeared around Huajiyu. All the divine swords were wheezing angrily as they surrounded her. They formed an unlimited domain with her in the center. The light of catastrophe rained down. The tribulation descended on Huajiyu. Huajiyu cast a glance at the sky. She was not afraid at all. She pointed a finger upwards. Immediately, countless divine swords appeared and collided head-on with the tribulation. Most of the light of catastrophe was eliminated. However, even so, there was still a myriad of light of catastrophe that landed on her. The light circulated around her body. On the ancient peak, Futian and the others were somewhat nervous. Little Ling held her breath as her crystal-clear eyes stared at the silhouette before her. In her head she prayed, "Masteress will surely be all right. Rest your worries. There are many great Buddhas on Spirit Mountain. If something were to happen, they could take the divine tribulation of the great path head-on." Hua Qingqing said softly to Futian. Futian nodded in agreement. Even though the tribulation was powerful, it was a form of power after all. True top existences could intervene in the power of the tribulation. However, if the situation escalated to that point, Huajiyu's cultivation would be affected too. Futian naturally wouldn't want to see that happen. In the sky above, the light of catastrophe stretched for tens of thousands of miles. The horrifying phenomenon caused people's hearts to tremble. Even at his current level, Futian still felt somewhat terrified by it. He believed that if this tribulation were targeted at him, he would feel threatened too. One could imagine the intensity of the attack Huajiyu was withstanding now. The heavens shook, and the power of the tribulation constantly descended. Huajiyu's clothes fluttered about, and her long jet-black hair danced frenziedly in the wind. Her entire body seemed to become a divine body, as she resisted the corrosion of the power of the tribulation. As time passed, the power of the tribulation showed no signs of weakening at all. Rumble. An even more frightening aura coalesced in the sky. Futian felt that it was somewhat familiar. It was similar to the final attack that Emperor Shi withstood back then. The heavenly law was delivering its punishment. Futian thought to himself. Last time, Emperor Shi had to withstand the sword of law. It was an extremely overbearing and sharp punishment. What would Huajiyu be facing? Each cultivator would experience a different power of law. The sword of law was a tribulation of law that had extremely overbearing attack power. What kind of power would Huajiyu experience? Futian looked up at the sky above. Endless light of catastrophe gathered together. A face faintly appeared over where the light gathered. It seemed to be the face of a woman. It was majestic and domineering. It was filled with endless authority. An astonishing storm of will appeared in the heavens above. The power of law emanated from this storm. Futian and the others felt an intense threat against their spiritual souls. It is the will of the law. It is a psychic attack of will. A Buddha commented as he looked at the face forming in the storm in the sky. Another Buddha commented, "This attack is extremely dangerous." However, for the will of the law to appear when she is undergoing the tribulation means that her psychic abilities are extremely powerful. She is impressive. Rumble. A dull thud could be heard. At that moment, it was as though the entire world fell silent. On Spirit Mountain, many cultivators felt as though their heads were about to explode. Their wills were collapsing, and their spiritual souls were about to shatter. This was especially so for people with low cultivation, such as Feng Siwen and the others. They held their heads in their hands as they felt a pang of pain. This power had not even attacked them yet. Futian also sensed a terrifyingly powerful attack. It made his thoughts freeze for a brief moment. However, in just a split second, everything seemed to have ended. When he regained his senses, he saw Huajiyu's figure trembling slightly as she stood there. She seemed off balance. His figure dashed over, and immediately appeared behind Hua Jiyu as he caught her. Hua Jiyu looked a little frail as she leaned on Yi Futian. However, she had a smile on her face. She raised her head and looked at Yi Futian, saying, "This is the first tribulation. Most likely, she would be capable enough to protect Yi Futian after she experienced the second tribulation." Many of Yi Futian's enemies were cultivators who had undergone the first tribulation. Yi Futian nodded and said, "This is the first tribulation." His eyes glistened with tenderness. He naturally understood why Hua Jiyu trained so hard. She did so because of him. Yi Futian himself also had to break through to the next plane as soon as possible. Chapter 2492. Unable to break through his level? Chapter 2492. Unable to break through his level? Atop Spirit Mountain, the tribulation clouds dissipated into the skies. As Buddhist light shrouded the glory of Spirit Mountain, everything returned to normal. It was as if everything before this had not happened at all. The Buddhas also left one after another. This incident today was considered rather unusual even for them. There had never been an outsider who came here to overcome the divine tribulations of the Great Path. Yi Futian brought Hua Jiyu to sit on the ancient mountain. The power of the Great Path of Life encased her and rejuvenated her vitality, causing her body to regenerate quickly. Hua Jiyu was sitting cross-legged as she stabilized her cultivation levels. Overcoming the divine tribulations depleted a great amount of her spiritual energy. Back then, Emperor, she only managed to withstand this divine tribulation by sacrificing the life of the black tortoise, while she powered through it with just her own body. Furthermore, in the end, Hua Jiyu was faced with a direct attack on her spiritual power by the will of the law, besieging her spiritual soul. It's not difficult to imagine how terrifying of an attack it was. It was even more dangerous than the sword of law. As Blind Tai and Chunyi left quietly, Fang Xiyuan and the others left as well. No one wanted to disturb Yi Futian and Hua Jiyu's cultivation. After seeing Hua Jiyu overcome the divine tribulation of the Great Path, they all felt that they should work hard too, so as not to hold them back. Other than them, the golden-winged giant Peng bird was also cultivating earnestly. Although he was once the student of Great Elder Ma Tian, he'd never had the chance to cultivate at Spirit Mountain. This was an opportunity for him, and he was trying his best to seize it, even going to listen to the great Buddhas on Spirit Mountain teach Buddhist scripture. Spirit Mountain was the cultivation ground of the Lord of all Buddhas, and the place where various Buddhas sought their paths. Other than the top great Buddhas from their respective regions, there was a significant number of great Buddhas who studied under Buddha elders cultivating at the Spirit Mountain, and they also held Buddhist scripture lectures. The golden-winged great Peng bird and Moyunzi frequently listened to these great Buddhas' lessons on scripture. As time passed, Yi Futian's group continued to strive and cultivate on the Spirit Mountain, and each of their cultivation levels increased by the day. Several years later, Chunyi had perfected his great path, and his powers evolved after reaching the 9th level of the Runhuang Plain. Even Blind Tai could no longer fight him. The two had sparred on the Spirit Mountain. Although Blind Tai also received the inheritance of the Imperial Star at the Starry Cultivation Court, he still couldn't compare to Chunyi. After all, Chunyi received the inheritance from the Bright Temple. Furthermore, he himself was the divine body of light, and was born with extraordinary potential. Blind Chun was even willing to die for him to inherit the power of the light. Back then at the Donghua domain, Chunyi could already fight against Yi Futian. Now he was far more powerful than back then, so much so that it would be difficult to even make an accurate comparison. On the other hand, for the past few years, Yi Futian felt the most troubled. Somehow, his cultivation was still stuck at the 8th level Runhuang Plain, and he had made no breakthrough. This made him feel rather uncanny, as he couldn't understand why and couldn't find any reason. At this time, many monks sat before a statue of a Buddha on Spirit Mountain. They were all sitting on zafus and listening in silence. Below the statue of the Buddha, a great Buddha was giving a lecture about Buddhist scripture. This great Buddha was a Buddha in Spirit Mountain, and had a deep understanding of the Buddhist doctrine. Yi Futian came to know many of the Buddhist cultivators atop the spirit mountains. He was also sitting below, listening to the lecture. After some time, the lecture ended. Many Buddhist cultivators started raising questions regarding the scripture, and the great Buddha helped to clarify their doubts one by one. The Buddhas only dispersed when there was no one else asking any more questions. However, Yi Futian sat quietly in his place and didn't leave. "Benefactor Yi, what's the matter?" This great Buddha smiled and asked Yi Futian. He was the Vajra Buddha, Lord of the Spirit Mountain, and had the deepest understanding of the Vajra Sutra. He was also extremely well versed in the Vajra spell, which Yi Futian learned and cultivated. "I do have something which I wish to seek your advice about, great Buddha," Yi Futian said. "Please tell me," Vajra Buddha Lord said with a smile. "Is it true that Buddhist cultivators could forge the divine wheel with their Buddha pure bodies?" Yi Futian asked. "Yes, indeed," the Vajra Buddha Lord nodded. "In fact, some Buddha pure bodies are the divine wheel of the great paths. There is no difference. The strength of their Buddha pure bodies is the strength of their divine wheels. The level of their Buddha pure bodies would be the level of their divine wheels, and by extension the plane of cultivation of the Buddhist cultivator?" Yi Futian said. Vajra Buddha Lord nodded. He couldn't quite understand what Yi Futian was trying to ask. Are there any Buddhist cultivators who have cultivated their Buddha pure bodies to the 9th plane of the Buddhist path, but their actual cultivation planes lagged behind? Yi Futian continued asking. Vajra Buddha Lord answered. "No, you are a cultivator yourself, so of course you understand that the level of one's divine wheel of the great path is equivalent to his cultivation plane. Having any of one's divine wheel of the great path reach the 9th level is the same as reaching the 9th level of the Runhuang plane himself. There are no exceptions?" Yi Futian asked. "No exceptions." Vajra Buddha Lord shook his head. "Thank you, Buddha Lord, for clearing up my queries." Yi Futian put his palms together and bowed. He then excused himself to leave the place. He turned and walked a few steps before his figure just disappeared into thin air. It was as if he had teleported somewhere else. The next instant, he directly appeared at his cultivation place on the ancient peak. "How is it?" Hua Jie walked to him and asked. Yi Futian shook his head and said, "I think the Buddha Lord doesn't know as well. I guess we'll have to just wait for a while and see." Hua Jie nodded. "I'll cultivate first," Yi Futian said. Then, he closed his eyes and sat cross-legged while his consciousness sank into the Life Palace. Inside the Life Palace, it was as though this was an entirely independent world. The world tree swayed gently as various powers of the great path circled it. The sun and moon hung in the sky, and celestial stars shone magnificently. It looked like a real world. The projection of Yi Futian's consciousness sat before the divine tree. With just a thought, powers of the great path started to conjure and materialize, turning into a divine wheel of the great path. Once the divine wheel of divine elephant appeared, an immense aura of the great path started to emanate from it. Then the Guqin divine wheel appeared as well, while enormous Buddha pure bodies of the Buddhist path materialized behind him. The auras of all of these great paths were tremendously powerful. All of them had reached the 9th level. After cultivating on the spirit mountains for many years, he completed his great paths and continuously augmented his great path divine wheels. Now, all of these divine wheels had entered the 9th level one after another, so he should have entered the 9th level Runhuang plane as well. Yet, he had not sensed a breakthrough at all, and continued to stay at the 8th level. Based on the categorization of cultivation planes, as Vajra Buddha Lord said, once the divine will entered the 9th level, then the cultivator himself would enter the 9th level as well. Based on that, of course, he would be considered a 9th level cultivator. However, he didn't feel that he had broken through the 8th plane, especially when he released his great path aura. Hua Jiu also felt that he was still at the 8th plane. This seemed to run contrary to common sense, and wasn't congruent to the rules of cultivation. The only possible explanation was that these divine wheels that have broken through to the 9th level were all derived and forged from the life spirits. And these life spirits are essentially nothingness in the first place, and could only appear by relying on the world tree. Only the world tree could be truly considered his natal spirit. In some sense, it could even be regarded as the only one. So could his cultivation level be related to that? Futian closed his eyes, fully focusing on cultivating and perceiving the great path. By now, the only divine wheel that hadn't made the breakthrough was the boundary wheel, which was derived from the world tree. Perhaps that was the reason why he didn't sense the opportunity to break through the 8th level. However, all of his great path powers had reached 9th level strength, and they were all unified as one. So why was he unable to take this final step? This was the part that he couldn't find the answer to. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.